à tout le monde. Good morning. I'm Maxime Kayadjanian from Institut Paris Région. Welcome in Paris. And we are very happy to see you here for this conference. So with Marion Tillet that is there, we have organized this morning conference in complement with the matchmaking event that will happen this afternoon, because we think that it's very interesting to have some presentation, on the different issues linked to building a low carbon and competitive tourism offer. And also we have three parts in this conference this morning. So the first part will deal with mobility and tourism with Aurélien Bigo, which is a researcher in this field. Then we will have a presentation on carbon offsetting with Myrto Tilianaki, which is there. And then we will have Julien Buot from the Association of Sustainable Tourism, which will make his presentation from Normandy, will be online. And then we will have a break. And then the objective is to have, of course, we will have some discussion. Don't hesitate to ask some question during this first part. The idea is to bring some thoughts, some elements to enrich the discussion on these different issues. And in the second part, we will have testimonies from 7 SMEs to see how they deal with all these issues, with the carbon footprint, the loss of biodiversity. What is their methodology? What are the different steps that they have put in place to put in place sustainable practices, let's say. Okay. And we will see then the afternoon, but we will have time for that. So I will leave the floor to Mr. Aurélien Bigo.
Thank you. Maybe if you can just put the presentation. So, yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm a researcher on the energy transition of transport, especially for France. I'm sorry in advance if my English is not perfect. I try to do my best on this part. And I'm going to present some key elements on mobility and tourism and what are the different levers for the energy transition, with the first part on some elements of context about transport emissions, a second part with a special focus on air transport, and a third part more on some opportunities or some perspectives for mobility and tourism with some objectives of reducing carbon emissions. So for the introduction, here are some trends about emissions for transport, past emissions since 1960 in France. So here are only domestic transportations in France, with a strong and important increase of emissions until the beginning of this new century. And in the past 10 years, the emissions are quite stable. And this is only for domestic transport. We can also add some emissions from biomass, because there are some biofuels which are not really sustainable today for the biofuels used in France. So we can also add these emissions from the production of biomass. And when we add international transportations, which are not accounted generally in the transport emissions from France, we have even more important transport emissions. And the trend for the past years are for international transportation that maritime transport emissions have decreased, and air transportation emissions have mostly increased in the past years for France. And the target for France, which is the target of the French National Low Carbon Strategy, is a target only for domestic transportation, but we see that we have a target of reducing emissions in the next few years and almost reaching zero emission in terms of direct emissions, so only emissions for the use of transportation modes, and the only emissions that are still in the transport sector in 2050 are emissions for the maritime and air transport, which are more difficult to decarbonize. And the French low carbon national strategy, in order to decrease these transport emissions, it sets 5 different drivers of transport emissions, which are also 5 different levers to decrease emission, and we can apply this kind of decomposition in 5 drivers for transport as a whole, for mobility transport, for mobility, especially for tourism too. So you can also apply these different drivers to your transportation activities. And the first of these 5 drivers is to moderate the transport demand. So it's like the number of kilometers that are from the passenger transport, from the passengers, for example. Kilometers, it can be for local mobility or even for tourism. The second driver or levers of energy transition is the modal shift. Especially if we want to modal shift that is favorable for energy transition, is like less car and airplanes and more public transportation, cycling or walking. The third driver is the vehicle occupancy, and especially the potential for carpooling by increasing the vehicle occupancy of cars. The fourth driver is energy efficiency of vehicle, which is partly technological options like improving the efficiency of engines, or it can also be like reducing speed or reducing the weight of vehicles. That can also decrease the energy consumptions of the vehicles. And finally, the fifth driver is to lower the carbon intensity of energy, or to decarbonize the energy, like less oil fuels and more of electricity, hydrogen, biofuels, if they are produced sustainably and with decarbonized energy, in order to really reduce the CO2 emissions of transport. And when we look at these 5 drivers, there are some drivers on the right which are more focused on technology options, and on the left side more on demand side measures or like sufficiency, which are some levers or drivers that can be more easily have more impact on the short term than technology, which have a lower rate of development in order to reduce the emission. So now some comparisons of the different means of transportation in terms for the moment in terms of CO2 emissions per kilometer. So if we want to compare different means of transportation for the same origin and destination, we can use this kind of graph and this kind of figures, and we see for the carbon footprint of the different transport modes in France, that we have train here it's for long distance. So we have a train which is more less impacting than buses, and even less impacting than cars and airplanes, which are generally quite this same kind of carbon footprint, but it depends also the occupancy rate that we take for cars. Also, if it's short haul airplanes or long haul airplanes, it also changes a bit the carbon footprint by kilometer for airplanes. But what is important to understand for the different transportation modes is that they are not used for the same kind of destinations, the same kind of travels, because some of them are more or less fast transport modes, and so we can use also other indicators in terms of carbon footprints that better include the fact that when we want to travel and to choose a destination and a transport mode, we also look at the number of the duration of the travel, the number of hours we can take to use a transport mode in particular. So it's also another indicator is to look at the CO2 emissions per hour, because in average we see that for local trips, the different transport modes are used for trips that are in average like 15 and 20 minutes. But for long distance transport modes, it's like in average like 3 or 4 hours for one trip. So if we use these 3 or 4 hours for a trip in train or in bus, or in car or in airplane, we can see what is the difference in terms of carbon footprint. And what we see is that when we use a fast transport mode like airplanes, the carbon footprint by hour of travel is very important, because the impact by kilometer is quite important, as we have seen before, but also because the distance that is possible with this fast transport mode is very important. And so it explains why there is quite the same kind of graph. If we see, if we look at the CO2 emissions per trip for long distance travels, for train, for bus, for car, and for airplane. And that's why I will focus a bit on airplanes in the just after this slide. And what we see is that for the past trends in France, we had a correlation between the mean speed of transportation, so it has increased, especially at the end of the past century, and the distance the passengers traveled, because when we have faster modes of transportation, we also make longer distances. Because of this kind of constant travel time of like 15-20 minutes for local trips, and more 3 or 4 hours for long distance trips. And when the distance traveled increased, it also increased the emissions, and that's what we have seen from the past for France. So now some special focus on the impact of aviation in terms of carbon footprint. So here is the importance of air transport within French mobility. In terms of trips on the total mobility in France, it's obviously a small part because the vast majority of trips are done for local trips. But as air transport is more used for longer trips, in terms of travel time, it's a bit more. So it's like 1% of the total mobility travel time in France. And it's also faster trips, faster travels. So in terms of total distance, it's even more important, like 16% in 2017. And it's approximately the same kind of order of magnitude in terms of CO2 emissions for the total mobility in France. And as we will see in the next slides, there are also other radiative forcing or other climate impacts of aviation. And so we can estimate in terms of total radiative forcing, so in terms of total impact on climate change among French mobility, that it's more or less 1/3 of the radiative forcing of the total mobility in France. So we can see by these graphs that aviation represents a small share of trips, more if we only take the long distance trips, obviously. And it's quite an important share of the contribution of French mobility to climate change. Another important issue about air transport emissions is that they are increasing. Here we can see the different sectors and the evolution from 1990 of the carbon impact of the different sectors, and we see that generally the carbon footprint of these sectors have decreased, except for domestic transportation, which have the carbon footprint have increased like 10% since 1990. And if we look at the international air transport sector, it's the sector which have had the most important increase in terms of CO2 emission in the past decades. An important issue about the sustainability of aviation path or carbon emissions trajectories is the fact that today there are quite limited technology options, at least for the short term. So we have had very important progress in the past on the energy efficiency of aircraft, and there is still some progress to do about these energy efficiency improvements, but until certain types of limits, as it's more and more difficult to have still more important, more efficiencies, for example, for aircraft engines. So it will be more and more difficult to have energy improvements in the next few years and decades. The other technology options is to use biofuels. So it's quite more easily feasible to use biofuel in the next few years, as we already use biofuels, for example, for cars. But as I said before, today, the biofuels used in France are not really sustainable because they are in competition with other crops used for food. and that it also has some changes in terms of soil occupation or like deforestation that also imply emissions. So for the future and for aviation, we need to use other kind of biofuels, and in French it's like second generation biofuels, which are produced from waste rather than from crops that are in competition with food. But so it's better in terms of environmental impact, but the limitation is more about the cost of this technology and more about the total potential of waste resources that we can use for this sector. So it will be maybe the main limit in terms of development of these biofuels for the future. And the other kind of energy we could use is directly electric, but it's not. It will be maybe some kind of niche market to use directly electric aircraft or for very short distances. But we can use like derivatives from electricity, like to produce hydrogen for using it in hydrogen aircrafts, or even with more transformations to produce electrofuels, which are produced from hydrogen. So we need decarbonized electricity to produce decarbonized hydrogen, and then to use this decarbonized hydrogen to produce electrofuels. So it's maybe a better option in terms of environment, but today it's not very developed. So we have to develop this kind of other fuels in the future in order to decarbonize the aviation sector. About the contribution of aviation to climate change, so some key figures from some last studies on this topic. So in 2020 we had a study that from Lee and Al that the aviation contribution to climate change is like 2.4% of anthropogenic CO2 emissions in 2018. But as I said before, there are not only CO2 emissions for aviation in terms of contribution to climate change. So they also estimated that in 2011, the aviation sector participated to 3.5% of effective radiative forcing. So it's the contribution in terms of global warming, but it's representative of the past emissions of transportation and the past contribution to the warming of 2011. But another figure that is in this report is that 66% of the effective radiative forcing, so the contribution to climate change, is due to non-CO2 effects. So about the current share of aviation to additional warming, we can estimate rather than the additional radiative forcing in 2018 is rather around 5 to 6% of the additional warming that we see in the recent years, except COVID years with the important decrease in terms of aviation traffic. And maybe I think another important aspect about carbon emissions for aviation is that there are some, it's like unequally distributed among population, and another study estimated that more than 50% of emissions in 2018 were due to the 1% of the population who are the most frequent flyers. It's also estimated that 11% of the world population traveled by air in 2018, and 4% for international travels. We also have figures for the top 1% EU households in terms of carbon footprints, for which the air transport emissions represent like 40% of their own carbon footprint, and like 22 tons of CO2 emissions per capita per year, that we can compare to a target of 2 tons of CO2 emissions per capita if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees by 2050. And I think I'm going to be a bit faster for the end of the presentation. And we also have this kind of graph for France, but maybe I will be gonna be a bit quicker. And I think some ways forward for the tourism sector is maybe, as we have seen, that sufficiency measures are important, at least for the short term. So I think maybe 3 options or 3 opportunities that can be more studied for the next few years and decades are to explore maybe closer destinations. Here are some pictures of French landscapes. So we see that we have also an important diversity of landscapes, even in France or in Europe. So closer destinations, maybe compared to some of the travels we do today. I think another option is to see at the lever or the driver of modal shift. Here is, for example, the opportunities or the renewal or the revival of night trains in France or in Europe that can also allow to decrease the carbon emissions of tourism, and maybe also to try to implement new ways of traveling. And these other maps are another network. This one are for the cycle route networks, and I think there is really a potential also to try some of these different ways of traveling. And maybe I'm just gonna, if you want to see the different key points of the presentation, maybe I'm gonna stop here.
Very much. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, it's the time to tell them. Do you have any reaction or? Pour les gens qui sont en ligne, vous pouvez poser des questions aussi. For the people that are online, they can ask questions also.
Okay, going back to the biofuel, what about all the technology about the engine actually from the airplanes? It's not only the biofuel. I think that the air companies are trying to do the best they can in terms of the engine also, not only the fuel. I think that KLM that was doing that, Air France also, United Airlines is one of the biggest. They made just the first trip from Chicago to Washington, biofuel only. So they're trying to do their best. And I think from 2000 until here, they just minimize a little bit, well, the most they can to do the best thing just to.
Yeah, about the engines, there are like maybe two different topics. There is the topic of energy efficiency of engines, and in the past there have been really important progress about this engine efficiency, and we can still expect some progress in the future. For biofuels, one of the main advantage of biofuel is that they can be used in present aircraft. So contrary to hydrogen or electric, we need new aircraft. For biofuels, yes, they can be used for the aircrafts we already have today, at least at 50% in terms of the total fuels used in the aircraft. But there are some tests in order to increase this share to more than 50%, and there are already like some tests or some.
Yes, I think it was Paris, Toulouse also.
Yes, it's possible. I don't remember exactly the different destinations, but I think it won't be major limitation in terms of adaptation of the engines to biofuels. I think really the most important limitations today are to produce biofuels that are quite sustainable, and in terms of cost, because one order of magnitude I've heard sometimes is like today it's like 4 times more costly, the sustainable biofuels for aviation compared to kerosene. So maybe it will change in the future, especially if the cost of oil and kerosene is higher, and also the development of biofuels will lower the cost of biofuels. But today it's like an important limitation, or it's more costly, and for the in terms of prospects for the future, it's more I think the total amount of sustainable resources we can take for aviation that will be, according to me, the main limitation for these biofuels. But it's an option to explore and an option to develop. But keeping in mind that we can't continue with this kind of growth of aviation traffic, this important growth, only counting on biofuels in order to decarbonize the aviation sector.
Another question for aviation. The SAF solution is not ready. Do you have an idea, your personal point, how we could stick to the Paris Agreement target, knowing that tax carbon is very low and it's going to evolve to a low level? Actually, the offset solution is not compulsory, and there is no regulation on the traffic volume. So, do you have a personal point of view what we are going to aim at? Because we know there is a lot of jobs in air companies, and tourism abroad is also important for openness, awareness. And so could you share if you have a personal point of view for future years?
I think now the strategy is to decarbonize by technology options like biofuels, like efficiency and derivatives from electricity like hydrogen and so on. But it will be insufficient, at least for the short term. For the longer terms, it also depends on the economic conditions, on the technology improvements. So it's more difficult to say in 2050 what will be the emissions of the air transport sector. But at least for the short term, if we want to decrease the emissions of the aviation sector, we need to moderate the traffic. So depending on how much we want to decrease the carbon emissions, the evolution of traffic will be different. If we want to, if we say, okay, the IPCC, so the International Panel on Climate Change, says to be under 1.5 degrees at the end of the century, we need 43% less emission in 2030 compared to the present levels of emissions. And if we apply this to the aviation sector, the aviation sector needs to decrease its traffic. So it's at the opposite of the current trend. But if we see, okay, we want to decrease the global emissions by 43%, but we don't want to decrease the air traffic, we need to shift some of the efforts of this decrease to other sectors. So we have to look at the other sector in order to see if they can do more than 43% of reduction of emissions. Yeah, it's like a political decision in terms of carbon budget and how we share the different efforts in order to decarbonize the economy. And today the option is like, okay, we will continue the growth of air traffic, but as it's also very difficult for the other sectors to decrease their carbon emissions by this very high ambition, so we are just we don't reach our climate targets, and that's the problem today with climate change and the lack of ambition in order to reach our targets.
Hi. So I have two questions. Last one just appeared while you were talking. So mainly what you're saying is that maybe what we have to do is regulate the amount of air traffic in order to actually reach those goals. But also would like to know, so more or less, how long will it take to shift towards a new kind of engines? Those are hydrogen engines, for example. How long would you think that this developing technology needs to actually be usable?
We don't see exactly, but we know what are the objectives from the aircraft manufacturers. And for example, for Airbus, it's like to develop an hydrogen airplane for short and medium haul travels by 2035. So we know that by this time, hydrogen won't be capable of reducing emissions of the air transport. And by 2035, if they reach the goal to develop this kind of commercial airplane, it will take time to have a lot of aircraft within the global park. I'm not sure of the word, but within the total aircraft. And also it's like for short and medium haul travels, and the vast majority of emissions for aviation are for long haul planes and traffic. So for this long haul traffic, it's more for biofuels or for electrofuels, which are very which are not developed a lot for now. And another target for France and for the European Union for biofuels is like 5% in 2030. So we know that if the target is too low, is to decrease emissions by 43%, if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees, a contribution of 5% by 2030 is not a big part of the progress. So really, in the short term, in the next few years, we know it will be very difficult to have important improvements by technologies. Still some energy efficiency, as I said. But I think the majority of the new fuels for aviation will be after 2030 or even after 2040. So for the short-term targets, it won't be enough to decrease the carbon emissions of air transport.
Aurélien, we have a last question on the web, so I will read it. So we have a question from Marie-Caroline Texier. Don't you think that the governments should regulate air traffic and invest in raising public awareness on the futility of traveling to a different city by plane just for the weekend, for example? Without the citizens' participation, can we succeed?
Last question.
In 1 minute.
I think that this question of regulating traffic should be addressed politically, and today it's not. It's like we will see green growth of aviation, and we know that at least in the short term it won't be possible. So really, I think it should be more addressed politically, and the decisions are sometimes difficult. There are also other issues like employment and so on. But we need to address it and to politically discuss about what are the best options in terms of future of aviation we want, in terms of carbon emissions, employment, and so on.
Thank you very much. So we will have now the next presentation from Myrto Tilianaki.
Hi, everyone. If we can just, thank you so much. So yes, I will be talking to you today about the hot topic of carbon offsetting, which is everywhere, but I believe that some of its implications are not very well understood today. I work for a French NGO called CCF des Terres Solidaires. We work on climate justice, and I focus particularly on the issue of carbon offsetting and carbon markets, especially land-based offsets. So offsets that have to do with forests or agriculture, so the land sector. But before we discuss offsetting and what it is, I'd like for us to take a step back and talk about net zero, because net zero is the umbrella concept that brought the idea of offsetting in recent years. So net zero or carbon neutrality has been integrated in the Paris Agreement since 2015. And it's the idea that there should be a balance between anthropogenic CO2 emissions and removals or absorptions of these emissions by 2050. So behind the concept of net zero is the idea that we should be reducing our emissions deeply and drastically, and then for what is considered to be residual emissions, so the small percentage after you've tried to reduce your emissions at a maximum level, we agree and accept scientifically that there will always be a small percentage of emissions that cannot be avoided or reduced. And so for these residual emissions, we can consider that restoring ecosystems or involving ourselves in other types of projects could help increase the capacity of natural carbon sinks, such as forests or agricultural soils, to better absorb CO2 emissions. The only issue here is that the Paris Agreement doesn't quantify which part of our efforts should go towards emissions reductions and what actually is considered to be residual emissions, which means that today a number of actors, states or private companies, have a free interpretation of how they can achieve net zero. And that is the source of the problem today. Also, just to add that the concept of carbon neutrality or net zero is applicable at state level. It is meant to be the global and collective efforts of states to reach that target by 2050. So it is not applicable at company or product level. For instance, a French consulting company called Carbone 4 says if you as a company want to be involved in any type of net zero effort, you can say that you are contributing to global net zero efforts. But to claim that, my remote control is net zero or I am net zero doesn't make much sense scientifically. Sorry. And just an illustration of what net zero means in practice. It means that, you can be adding up to the atmosphere 0 tons, subtracting 0 tons, you're at net zero. You can be adding to the atmosphere 10 tons, subtracting 10, you're at 0. But you can also be adding 100 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 tons, but you're subtracting the same amount or hoping to be subtracting the same amount and storing it permanently, and you are at 0. So I think what is quite obvious here is that the premise behind net zero, if not applied correctly, means that we keep adding up emissions into the atmosphere by hoping that these emissions will disappear eventually. Sorry, I keep mixing this up. And so what is carbon offsetting? It is the idea that emissions from human activities basically can be cancelled out by projects that are meant to reduce or store carbon. So today, as I mentioned before, I will be focusing on projects that are afforestation or reforestation projects, so basically planting forests or changing practices in agriculture that are meant to be storing more carbon. And a point that I will quickly mention, I'm not going to get into it in detail, but feel free to ask me questions afterwards. So these projects that are meant to be storing carbon permanently generate carbon credits that are then traded in international carbon markets. And so these projects today have a set of criteria. So for a project to be considered as good quality, it needs to meet a certain amount of criteria, especially for soil carbon sequestration. So as I mentioned, sequestration that takes place in the land sector, forests or agriculture. So these criteria are additionality. So it means that the reductions will not have taken place in the absence of this particular project, so that the business as usual scenario is not possible, that the project adds a reduction. The other criteria is permanence. These reductions are meant to be permanent. And why is that? It is because when you emit a ton of CO2 in the atmosphere, it stays there for about 100 years. So if we are to consider that sequestration of a project is permanent or long-term, it should be also meeting that amount of time. The project also needs to meet criteria of rigorous measurement, reporting, and verification. And projects also need to have human rights or biodiversity safeguards. Oftentimes we see in projects criteria lists that there is a no harm or no net harm principle behind them. So they should by no means be putting in danger biodiversity or human rights. However, there are a set of challenges, unfortunately, today in the majority of carbon offsetting projects that particularly have to do with the land sector. So as I mentioned before, the question of permanence. So a project needs to be storing carbon for a very long term. That is a very difficult thing to guarantee because soil carbon sequestration is by definition impermanent and highly reversible. When it comes to forests, for example, we see a notice today that because of global warming, it is much easier for wildfires to burn trees down. We also need to be in a capacity to guarantee that these trees will not get cut down, or in terms of agricultural practices, there will not be a change of practice that will then reverse the storage of carbon. So unfortunately today, soil carbon sequestration is extremely vulnerable to climate phenomena. And there are also a lot of uncertainties around measurement. There is no single guarantee today or single method to measure how much carbon is stored long-term on the ground. It is very difficult today to prove and calculate that aspect. There are also many projects, not all, but many projects that unfortunately do lack additionality that would have taken place anyway, but they do exist and they generate carbon credits that are then traded in carbon markets. And two other points that echo what I've already mentioned is that, there's no equivalence between emissions reductions and removals. There is no safer way of reaching basically the Paris Agreement goals than reducing emissions. Relying on removals to absorb the majority of our emissions is not, unfortunately, a permanent and certain way of reaching Paris Agreement goals. So that's why, unfortunately, today, carbon offsets don't deliver real emissions reductions. And when applied in that sense, what I explained before, they replace actual emissions reductions. They delay much needed climate action. And so the goal of staying beyond 1.5 or 2 degrees is moving further away. The other point is, again, echoing the previous points, is that offsets today, the way they are in practice applied, allow business as usual and sometimes even greenwashing. For instance, last month, I think, or a month and a half ago, a German institute did an analysis of 25 net zero pledges by 25 companies such as Amazon, IKEA, and Nestle. And they looked at the net zero pledges of these companies and said, okay, these companies are claiming to have a neutral, zero impact, environmental impact. So how much of their efforts go towards emissions reductions, for instance, by 2030? And the response was quite disturbing. It's actually 23%. Most of these companies on average have committed themselves to reducing their emissions by 23%, but they're claiming to be climate neutral or carbon neutral. So I think it's quite obvious that there is a disequilibrium between these claims and what is happening in practice. And so in addition to the previous points, there's also an aspect that concerns, as I mentioned before, human rights and biodiversity. And why is that? It is because in order to plant, regarding forests, these tens of millions of trees, most projects take place today in countries of the global south, in Africa, Latin America, or Asia, places where you're able to plant these huge amounts of forests, and places where land rights are not very robust. So what happens is that we've seen a lot of examples in the past, projects that were subject to the Kyoto Protocol, the protocol that came before the Paris Agreement, or other projects today that are part of voluntary carbon markets. So these forests are planted in places where local communities or indigenous communities depend on land basically to feed themselves and live. And what happens more often than not is that these communities are given, paperwork that is not in their mother tongue, or they're intimidated to sign agreements to say, okay, we give these part of our land to X company, or which any other entity wants to have access to their land, and they lose access basically from one day to the next. So there are examples, unfortunately, today of human rights violations and land grabs. And also there is a danger to biodiversity because especially these forest projects, what is planted more often than not is fast-growing monocultures that are non-native to the regions. So they consume a lot of water, they don't grow up there, they're subject to wildfires and other meteorological phenomena. So again, not a great idea in terms of biodiversity. And to echo a point that was mentioned before regarding biofuels, first of all, if we were to plant trees to meet net zero pledges of all entities today, we would have to wonder where are we going to plant all those trees. There is not enough space on the planet, but also there is a potential competition with food production. And at today's current climate, what is happening in Ukraine, it is very difficult to envisage that we will put that amount of pressure to our lands just to compensate the emissions of our ongoing activities. And to illustrate that, Shell, the oil company in the Netherlands, claimed to be net zero by 2050. So set this objective. And in order to be net zero, Shell had to offset a big part of its emissions. And in order to offset its emissions, it needed, this is a calculation made by ActionAid, 3 times the size of the Netherlands to offset its emissions by 2030. So it is a very real issue. There is not enough space on Earth, unfortunately, to plant all these trees. Without going on for very long on that, we also, the NGO I work for, we also did an analysis of 3 French corporations. The idea was to look at the 3 most emitting sectors in France. So the companies are Total Energy, Nespresso, and Air France. And, you know, we came to the same observations as the German New Climate Institute, is that these companies massively rely on offsets to reach their net zero goals and unfortunately do very little to reduce their emissions. And we particularly looked at a specific project communicated by Total Energy in the Republic of Congo. It is a plantation of a 40,000 hectare forest in a savanna. So the savanna will be cut down, and what will be planted instead is acacias, fast-growing monocultures originating in Australia. And also we got information from the ground that communities live around the area and depend on the land for agricultural or other activities and have not been consulted to this date about this project. So I'm going to jump through the carbon market slide, but I will come to the recommendation bit. I'm not sure how many of you work for companies that set targets that might reach net zero goals, but in a nutshell, what we can say today is that emissions reductions should be your absolute priority. Also, in terms of what I mentioned before, the residual emissions, it's very easy to say, you know, I will reduce 20% of my emissions, so, you know, 70% of my emissions are residuals. That doesn't, you know, make much sense. So it is really important to try to minimize what we call residual emissions. It is also really important to report annual and actual emissions, not net emissions reductions, because of what we mentioned before. Net behind it disguises that you are removing and absorbing emissions. So it's really important to talk about real emissions reductions, not net. It is also important to set separate targets and accounting for reductions of all 3 scopes and removal. So again, make a distinction between how much of your effort is going towards emissions reductions and how much is going towards removals. And offsetting should not be allowed because it creates the sense that your environmental impact is cancelled out. Again, if that's something that you're interested in, there are consultancies in France and elsewhere that try to accompany companies around this work, and they will tell you that there is different terminology and there are different ways of doing this that is not offsetting. And the last point is, you know, whatever you get yourselves involved with, any type of project, please make sure that it doesn't harm or endanger human rights or biodiversity. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Any question or reaction? I have a question for you, SMEs, for especially travel agencies. What is the level of your awareness about this issue of carbon offsetting? Do you have any answer?
We are doing, and we are working from 2020 in this way, and trying more to reduce our emissions, and not so much about offsetting. No, we have implemented more actions about mitigation and adaptation. That is very important too, especially in Spain, that we will have a lot of issues and impacts, negative impacts about climate change. No, now we are having now. Then I will explain later if you prefer.
You don't have to have questions now, but feel free to reach out if you have any other specific questions. I'm happy to share my email address. So if you need any more info, or if you have any questions, please don't hesitate.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Myrto. So now we will have a presentation that is online with Julien Bigo. Is not connected. His connection is ongoing. Okay.
Bonjour. Hello.
Welcome, Julien, bienvenue.
Thank you. Merci, bonjour.
C'est à vous.
Bonjour, merci à vous, bonjour. Vous m'entendez?
Si on pourrait avoir le son.
Hello everybody, bonjour.
Alors, attendez 2 secondes, puisque nous allons traduire du français vers l'anglais. Donc, c'est Édouard qui va s'occuper de la traduction. Est-ce que vous pouvez parler pour voir si on vous entend?
Oui, bonjour à tous. Oui, bonjour à tous. Bonjour à tous.
Très bien. Donc, je vais vous demander de parler doucement puisqu'il y a Édouard qui va vous traduire. Hein. Donc voilà, lui laisser le temps de traduire et tout ira bien comme ça. Merci à vous. Bonne présentation.
Merci pour l'invitation. Bonjour à toutes et tous. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi de pouvoir échanger avec vous, puisque je prévois de faire une première présentation. Et ensuite, on pourra avoir un échange ensemble.
Hello, it's a pleasure to have this presentation with you, and I'm gonna make you a different presentation just after.
Peut-être que vous voyez mon écran derrière qui pourra illustrer un petit peu mes propos.
You can see my presentation behind to illustrate my saying.
Bon, le thème, c'est le tourisme responsable, diversité et perspective de développement des offres. Je rebondirai sur ce qui a été dit précédemment sur la question de l'urgence climatique en particulier.
My subject is the diversity of the offer, and I will talk about climate emergency specifically.
Donc, je m'appelle Julien Bigo, je suis directeur d'une association qui s'appelle Agir pour un tourisme responsable. Et vous avez également
Julien Bigo, directeur of the association Agir pour un tourisme durable.
Donc, j'ai d'autres casquettes. Je suis aussi le secrétaire du réseau interprofessionnel des acteurs du tourisme durable. J'en parlerai tout à l'heure. Je suis aussi au syndicat des entreprises du tour operating, chez Normandie Tourisme également, parce que je vous parle depuis la Normandie. Et puis, une nouvelle activité, puisque je développe une fresque du tourisme qui va sortir dans les prochains mois. Mais mon activité principale, c'est fédérer les voyagistes français engagés dans le tourisme responsable.
My main activity is to federate all the professionals in tourism.
Donc, je présenterai un peu plus en détail comment en France l'association organise ce collectif de voyagistes engagés dans le tourisme responsable. Ensuite, je préciserai comment on travaille depuis plusieurs années sur les questions climatiques et sur le voyage bas carbone. Je donnerai des exemples. Je pense que c'est intéressant aussi de donner des exemples sur le que font les tours opérateurs français face à l'urgence climatique. Et je terminerai sur l'enjeu de sortir du simple sujet du climat. C'est un sujet important, mais le tourisme responsable dépasse ce thème.
My presentation will be on responsible tourism, about the profession, about responsible tourism and climate, and about what tour operators do with the climate emergency, and also beyond tour operators, all the profession.
Donc voilà, ça c'est le logo de l'association qui est à la fois donc une association de voyagistes, mais aussi un label qui est contrôlé en France par EcoCert Environnement.
This is the logo of the association, which is also a label, certified label.
Alors le contexte dans lequel je parle, il est vraiment très riche. Il se passe beaucoup de choses depuis quelques semaines, quelques mois en France. Je peux parler du débat qu'il y a eu autour de l'organisation d'un congrès des agences de voyage françaises en République dominicaine à Punta Cana. J'en dirai pas plus, mais sachez que sur les réseaux sociaux, beaucoup d'ONG, mais beaucoup de professionnels contestent l'idée de faire des congrès d'agences de voyage très loin pour quelques jours.
There are a lot of news, and recently there was in Punta Cana a meeting, and you can see a lot of things on the social medias, and people and agency contest the fact to organize big meetings with a lot of organization coming from very distant places. And there would be more efficient ways to act.
Néanmoins, j'ai participé à distance depuis la Normandie à ce grand congrès. Il y avait plusieurs centaines d'agences de voyage sur le thème du voyage bas carbone. Donc c'était un pied de nez aux participants. Je le faisais depuis la Normandie et j'ai annoncé le lancement d'un projet sur lequel on pourra aussi échanger tout à l'heure. Un projet Erasmus+, un projet européen sur le voyage bas carbone avec la Belgique, la Grèce, l'Espagne, l'Italie et la France. Et l'idée, c'est vraiment de démontrer que on doit pas être tétanisé par le tourisme bas carbone. Ça doit nous encourager à faire évoluer les méthodologies, les productions de voyage. On doit aussi voir ça comme une opportunité, pas uniquement comme une contrainte et une menace pour notre métier.
But I decided to participate to this congress in Punta Cana from remotely from Normandy, and it was mostly about low carbon things, and 100 organizations took part to the congress. I presented a project which is called Erasmus+. It's about it's a European project with a lot of things into this kind of ideas.
Et donc, ça doit vraiment être considéré comme une opportunité aussi de faire des voyages plus exceptionnels dans tous les sens du terme, peut-être plus rares mais meilleurs, moins souvent, plus longtemps et de meilleure qualité. C'est ça aussi le message du tourisme responsable face à l'urgence climatique.
The main message for considering climate urgency is to make less travels, but to give a priority to the quality of it.
Néanmoins, l'ADN de l'association ATR, c'est vraiment le voyage lointain. L'idée, c'est de ne pas arrêter de faire des voyages à l'autre bout du monde, mais de vraiment essayer de démontrer que les voyages qu'on va effectuer à l'autre bout du monde, ils ont un impact positif. Ils créent de l'emploi, ils créent de la valeur, ils protègent l'environnement. C'est aussi un moyen de valoriser l'environnement. C'est vraiment un des leitmotifs de notre association, c'est aussi de défendre le voyage lointain, à condition qu'il soit fait le plus proprement possible.
One of the aim of the association is also to help the long distance travel, making sure they create jobs, they are good for the economics, and they are done in good context.
Un des enjeux aujourd'hui, c'est évidemment la question marketing. Est-ce que vraiment il y a un marché des voyageurs pour faire des voyages plus responsables? Toutes les études, elles le démontrent aujourd'hui. Vraiment, il y a une maturité de l'opinion du marché pour voyager autrement, plus responsable.
One of the points is there a market now for sustainable tourism? And all the studies show that there is now a market for that.
Mais il y a une meilleure raison encore que l'approche marketing client, c'est la question du marketing employeur. Aujourd'hui, on le voit dans l'hôtellerie-restauration, on le voit aussi dans beaucoup d'autres métiers en France, y compris des métiers qualifiés. Les futures générations sont en train de challenger les entreprises, ne veulent plus rejoindre, ne veulent plus travailler pour des entreprises qui ne sont pas capables de démontrer le sens de leur activité, l'impact écologique, social. Et aujourd'hui, peut-être que la priorité, notre principale motivation à agir pour un tourisme responsable, c'est aussi être capable de recruter demain des collaborateurs qui vont travailler dans les entreprises de voyage et de tourisme.
And also the companies are challenged by the young generation, by the students, to be into those criteria for the future, and can be a big change because of that.
Particulièrement, à nouveau, ces dernières semaines, les choses sont en train de s'accélérer. Dans les grandes écoles, au moment des cérémonies de remise des diplômes, à travers des rapports d'ingénieurs qui démontrent que dans le voyage, on doit marquer une rupture dans nos pratiques pour qu'ils soient beaucoup plus sobres en carbone. Les choses s'accélèrent en quelques semaines. Il y a eu des grands rapports, il y a eu des grandes manifestations. C'est vraiment quelque chose qui est en train de s'accélérer depuis 2019, 2017, la pandémie, mais aussi aujourd'hui le retour du tourisme, un petit peu trop comme avant, demande vraiment une accélération des engagements.
After the COVID and now those last years, it became more important. And in a lot of great schools in France, there are a lot of students that make public positions for sustainable works in general, and it becomes more and more important.
Je vous parle d'un point de vue avec du recul. L'association ATR, elle a été créée en 2004. C'est vraiment une association pionnière en France pour le voyage responsable. Et c'est vrai que pendant longtemps, on n'a pas travaillé la question du climat, mais on a la chance d'avoir quand même presque 20 années d'expérience dans l'accompagnement d'un voyage plus responsable.
The association has 20 years of experience. It exists since 2004, and the label since 2007. And we are experienced in accompanying the professionals.
Et donc l'association était composée au départ de 10 agences de trek, agences de voyage d'aventure. Et aujourd'hui, nous sommes plus de 60 agences, des très petites entreprises, des grands groupes, des entreprises qui font toujours du voyage à pied, à vélo, peut-être plus sobres en carbone, mais aussi des voyages de croisière, des voyages en hôtel club, des voyages qui font du circuit culturel. Il y a une grande diversité de profils de tour opérateurs qui décident de s'engager avec nous depuis quelques années. C'est plutôt un bon signal.
We began with 10 tracking agencies, but now it's much more diversified, and we are 60. We have cruise professionals, hotels, professionals for circuits, much more diversified and representative of all the profession in sustainable tourism.
Et même si toutes ces entreprises ne sont pas au même niveau d'engagement, on a mis en place un label pour garantir qu'un certain nombre de critères minimums sont respectés et garantir aux voyageurs que le tourisme va avoir un meilleur impact.
All the companies are not at the same level of quality, but we created a label that guarantee a minimum of commitment.
Pendant longtemps, nous avons exclu les engagements sur le climat, je le disais tout à l'heure. Depuis 2015, depuis la COP21 à Paris, on a décidé d'arrêter de faire l'autruche et de dire, nous, tour opérateurs, on doit s'engager avec 3 types d'actions importantes. Évaluer de manière sérieuse l'empreinte carbone de nos entreprises et de nos voyages. Avoir une stratégie de réduction de cette empreinte carbone en étant réaliste sur le fait qu'il y a toujours une part incompressible liée à la mobilité notamment. Avion ou même voiture ou même toute forme de mobilité ont une empreinte. Et puis, contribuer à des projets de solidarité climatique. Voilà, on accompagne les entreprises pour qu'elles aient une stratégie de lutte contre le changement climatique.
We decided to get really involved in the Paris Agreement. Before it was not really the case, but now it's much more serious, a real change. We decided to focus on 3 things: evaluation of the footprint, reduction strategy, and also to contribute with the actors.
Là, vous avez à l'écran les 16 tours opérateurs qui sont titulaires du label. Parmi les 70 membres, il n'y a que 16 qui ont décroché le label.
Only 16 organizations could get the label.
Et le label est contrôlé chaque année par EcoCert Environnement, qui va vérifier que les engagements pris sont bien respectés.
The label is controlled each year by EcoCert Environment to make sure all the engagements are clear for everybody.
Je reviens sur le climat. Donc, depuis 2015, on a exigé des critères liés au climat pour enrichir les exigences du label. Et je vais vous donner quelques exemples. Mais la première chose qui est importante pour nous, c'est que l'entreprise et ses parties prenantes, clients, fournisseurs réceptifs, mais aussi collaborateurs, comprennent l'urgence climatique et les interactions entre le tourisme et le changement climatique. La base d'une action climat, c'est la pédagogie, c'est la sensibilisation, c'est la formation de l'ensemble des parties prenantes.
Since 2015, we decided to make the criteria of the label more severe, but also we realized that the main point is the general understanding by every professional in every organization of the purpose, the general purpose of the meaning of all those changes.
On a la chance d'avoir en France un outil pas spécialisé pour le tourisme, mais un outil de sensibilisation du grand public, des professionnels à l'urgence climatique. On appelle ça la fresque du climat. Vous en avez peut-être entendu parler. Elle est accessible en anglais également.
We are lucky to have a specific tool in France about that is called la fresque du climat. Maybe you know it.
Ce qui est important, c'est qu'on a des animateurs qui passent beaucoup de temps avec les équipes pour former les professionnels à la fresque du climat, et on a aussi développé des outils pour expliquer les spécificités du tourisme par rapport au changement climatique. Vous en avez entendu parler tout à l'heure. Il faut bien comprendre que le tourisme, il est à la fois victime et bourreau dans les changements, en matière de changement climatique. Il est victime parce que nos destinations, notre métier, il est contesté, nos destinations sont menacées par les changements climatiques, mais aussi parce que le tourisme contribue déjà à plus de 10% des émissions globales de CO2.
Tourism is responsible for 10% of the emissions of CO2, and there is to understand that tourism is responsible, but also is a victim of the consequences of the changes, bad changes.
Pour proposer des expériences touristiques de qualité, on a besoin d'un climat qui soit agréable, ni trop chaud, ni trop froid. Pour aller faire de la montagne l'hiver, on a besoin de neige. On a besoin que les plages ne soient pas submergées. On a besoin que les pays, même des pays dits en développement, aient les capacités d'accueillir les touristes de manière confortable. Confortable, c'est pas forcément le luxe, mais on a besoin qu'il y ait des systèmes d'assainissement des eaux usées qui soient au niveau, qu'il y ait de l'eau potable. Et de manière générale, nos destinations de proximité en France, en Europe, mais encore plus nos destinations lointaines dans les pays en développement, elles sont menacées par le changement climatique. C'est important de bien comprendre ça.
Attractive and welcoming destinations also depend on the sustainability of the tourism economy. And it is the duty of professionals to protect their resources. We need snow, we need clean water, clean air, everything.
Et c'est vrai que de manière générale, notre matière première, notre ressource sur laquelle on s'appuie, ce sont des paysages de qualité, des populations qui sont accueillantes. Et si on n'est pas capable de garantir ça, notre business ne sera pas très durable longtemps.
The resource is the landscape, is the people who are welcoming, and if it doesn't last this way, it won't work for tourism anymore.
Donc je reviens sur les 3 grands axes et je vais donner des exemples sur la manière dont les entreprises travaillent le climat. Je vais commencer par Voyageurs du Monde, qui est une grande entreprise de voyage en France, qui travaille depuis 2005, qui donne l'exemple à ses confrères sur ces questions-là, notamment sur la question du calcul de l'empreinte carbone.
Since 2005, Voyageurs du Monde is really implied into calculating the footprint.
Donc on a des entreprises dans notre association qui sont vraiment en avance et qui partagent leur méthodologie, parfois leurs erreurs, parfois leurs succès. Et là, on a vraiment une méthodologie vraiment robuste qui est proposée à tous les voyagistes français pour calculer leur empreinte carbone.
Voyageurs du Monde is a pioneer, and they developed an advanced methodology to make evaluation, and they share it.
Le deuxième sujet, j'aurai d'autres exemples sur l'évaluation, mais un des sujets déterminants, c'est la réduction. Et là, on a le Club Méditerranée, qui est aussi une très grande entreprise française, qui est depuis nombreuses années travaille sur une méthodologie SBT, Science Based Targets, pour travailler sa trajectoire de réduction des émissions de CO2.
We have other professionals who are really advanced, like Club Méditerranée, Club Med. They have their specific methodology called SBT, focused on their reduction of emission.
On a d'autres entreprises et l'association ATR a décidé de rejoindre, de signer la déclaration de Glasgow, qui a été signée lors de la COP 26 à Glasgow pour proclamer l'urgence climatique et s'engager à réduire de 55% les émissions de CO2 d'ici 2030.
ATR decided to sign the Glasgow Declaration, took place during the COP26, and the purpose is to reduce the emissions of 55%.
Pour honorer cet engagement de réduction forte tous les ans des émissions de CO2, on s'appuie sur beaucoup de choses, notamment Nomade Aventure, qui propose à tous ses clients sur l'Europe de plus utiliser l'avion, mais de proposer le train sur toutes les destinations en Europe.
This purpose is really strong. So we have, for example, Nomade Aventure that suggests its client to use the train instead of the plane for all the destinations in Europe.
On a également Salin Holidays, qui est un grand tour opérateur, qui a développé une gamme de voyages bas carbone, sans avion, avec des hôtels écologiques. Voilà. Ils ont une gamme caractéristique de l'engagement pour un tourisme responsable bas carbone. Salin Holidays.
Salin Holidays is another example, a big company. They developed an offer of low carbon travels.
On a La Balaguère, qui est une agence de trek qui avait développé des city trips de 2-3 jours, des week-ends en Europe. Ils ont décidé d'arrêter des voyages trop courts.
Another example is La Balaguère, who was specialized in short trips. They decided to stop too short and too distant short trips.
Et enfin, pour un dernier exemple sur la réduction qui est intéressante, je disais voyager moins souvent, plus longtemps, ça peut être aussi loin, mais beaucoup plus longtemps. Et on a Aimsa Voyage, qui est une nouvelle entreprise très engagée, Aimsa Voyage, qui a interdit les voyages long courriers de moins d'un mois. Si on veut partir loin, il faut prendre un mois de vacances pour profiter de belles vacances et des vacances exceptionnelles.
Another example is Aimsa Voyage. They decided to propose exceptional long distance trip only. You're not supposed anymore to travel far for less than 1 month. So it's 1 month at least and exceptional.
Là, on vient de parler beaucoup de réduction, j'ai donné des exemples, on pourra échanger tout à l'heure, mais nous, on reste aussi convaincus qu'une des solutions, pas la solution, mais une des solutions, alors en français, le mot est trop galvaudé aujourd'hui, donc on parle plus de compensation carbone, mais c'est quand même de ça dont il s'agit, on parle de contribution carbone. Et nous, on exige, pour être titulaire du label ATR, on exige que 100% des émissions de CO2 de l'ensemble de l'entreprise, mais aussi des voyages des clients, fassent l'objet d'une contribution carbone avec des projets de solidarité climatique qui génèrent des crédits carbone certifiés.
One of the big solutions is compensation. We talk more about contribution, and our label defines it like this. Companies are supposed to make 100% compensation to make part of the label.
Donc nous avons des entreprises comme Double Sens, qui a été la première en 2017 à intégrer cette exigence de contribution carbone à 100%. Et là, à partir du 1er janvier 2023, toutes les entreprises qui veulent être titulaires du label doivent évaluer, réduire et contribuer à 100% en finançant des projets sérieux de solidarité climatique.
Double Sens was the first one in 2017, and it's going to be something you have to do to make part of the label. The beginning of 23, all the companies will have to make a 100% contribution to make part of the label.
Et pour terminer sur le sujet climat, ce qui est vraiment important, c'est d'associer ses fournisseurs, d'associer ses clients, d'associer ses collaborateurs dans cette stratégie bas carbone. Et plus on va aller dans le temps, plus le voyage sera pointé du doigt, plus on aura intérêt à apporter des preuves de notre engagement face au changement climatique.
Another thing is also to imply every actor, every producer, every step of the production of the tourism offer, and it's going to be more and more important in the future.
Je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, au-delà d'ATR et les tours opérateurs, moi je représente un réseau beaucoup plus vaste qui regroupe tous les acteurs français du tourisme durable. Ça s'appelle ATD, acteurs du tourisme durable.
I'm not only representing ATR, I'm also representing ATD, which is the French professional French association, association tourisme durable.
Et elle regroupe à la fois des offices du tourisme, des hôtels en France, des écoles, des bureaux d'études, des médias, et tous ensemble, on travaille le tourisme durable. On pense qu'il faut croiser les regards pour agir ensemble, notamment sur ce sujet du climat.
It's this organization is made of a lot of different diversity of actors, actually, school, medias, hotels, every kind of professional of tourism, and we are trying to create a common point of view of the future.
Donc, si ça vous intéresse, on a un livre blanc qui a été publié en 2020. On a travaillé pendant 3 ans, un livre blanc sur le tourisme face au changement climatique, avec tous les grands enjeux, les bonnes pratiques, les solutions. Il n'est pas traduit en anglais, mais voilà, il est à votre disposition. Le livre blanc du tourisme face au changement climatique.
We published in 2020 a white paper about tourism and climate change that is available in French.
Ce qui est vraiment important de comprendre, c'est qu'un office du tourisme, par exemple, je vais prendre cet exemple-là, je pourrais prendre des exemples dans les campings, les restaurants, qui travaillent, qui sont menacés par le changement climatique, qui travaillent sur des menus bons pour le climat, qui parfois sont obligés de déménager leur camping parce que la mer arrive sur les terrains. Les restaurants, j'en parlais, des menus avec moins de viande, avec des produits locaux, des légumes produits à côté. L'idée, c'est que tous, on doit travailler à s'adapter et réduire notre empreinte carbone.
All kind of professionals, they work on their footprint. For example, restaurant, they try to get more local products. Tourism office, they try to find a local offer, and everybody has to work on this in this direction.
Il y a un débat en France sur les offices du tourisme. Il faut savoir que la France, c'est la première destination touristique mondiale en nombre de touristes étrangers qui viennent en France. On a à peu près 90-100 millions de personnes d'autres pays qui viennent visiter la France. Et beaucoup d'offices du tourisme continuent de faire beaucoup de promotions sur les marchés lointains, de gens qui viennent en avion jusqu'en France.
There is a debate in France. We have 100 million visitors each year, and a lot of office tourism, they still propose long distance trip. So not everybody is agree with that.
Nous, les voyagistes, on travaille depuis maintenant beaucoup d'années sur assumer de faire des voyages loin, exceptionnels, moins souvent, plus responsables. On invite aujourd'hui les offices du tourisme à travailler aussi leur empreinte carbone, en tout cas l'empreinte carbone de leurs voyageurs. Et peut-être de penser un petit peu moins dépenser d'argent sur la promotion sur les marchés lointains et de se dire que peut-être qu'il y a beaucoup de marchés locaux qui seraient intéressants à aller chercher, attirer.
We suggest to tourism office that they look for local offers, that they create new offers on a local field.
La question, j'aurais pu être beaucoup plus long et j'ai un texte beaucoup plus long que je vous transmettrai avec des choses peut-être plus détaillées. Comme là, il faut que je réduise, que je conclue. On peut tous se poser la question, est-ce que les voyageurs, eux, sont prêts à ce changement? J'ai beaucoup parlé des professionnels. On a la responsabilité de proposer une offre différente.
As a conclusion, there is a question. We work a lot on the professionals, but also there is the question is also has also to be answered for the clients. Are the travelers ready for all those changes? That's a big question too.
Beaucoup d'études démontrent que, je le disais, il y a une maturité dans les enquêtes. Les gens déclarent. Parfois, c'est plus compliqué à observer dans les comportements des consommateurs.
There are studies that shows that clients are getting more mature now, and they declare they would be ready for a different offer. But also, when we look at the reality, for now they don't change that much their choices.
Mais on a la responsabilité de proposer beaucoup plus d'autres types de produits et d'afficher beaucoup plus nos engagements pour associer les voyageurs à cette ambition.
That's why, as professionals, we have the responsibility to show the clients how it could be and how they could choose travels with less impact and everything.
Et pour terminer, quasiment, j'ai presque fini. Il y a une niche, il y a quelques niches, le tourisme, le tourisme à vélo, la randonnée, le tourisme d'aventure, les micro-aventures. C'est des niches et on ne veut surtout pas limiter le tourisme responsable à ces niches. Mais ces niches sont très dynamiques, sont en très très forte croissance, notamment le vélo. Et ça, c'est quand même un signal que les voyageurs veulent voyager plus responsables et plus sobres en carbone.
There are small markets already, and they are getting much more dynamics, like bike, like slow tourism, and it's a big signal for the future.
Et bon, voilà, maintenant c'est ma conclusion, mais je dirais que quelles que soient les actions qu'on va pouvoir mener, il faudra être toujours plus ambitieux et rester très humble. Même le voyage local, il a des impacts négatifs et il faut les réduire, y compris sur le carbone. Mais il a aussi beaucoup de vertus économiques, sociales, environnementales, et donc c'est une belle industrie, le tourisme. Mais c'est vrai que si on veut pouvoir voyager demain, il faut vraiment accélérer dès aujourd'hui les engagements, les bonnes pratiques responsables et bas carbone.
tourism is a great industry and it has to last for everybody, and we have to think about low carbon activities much more, to be focused on that, on the impact of everything. Even local tourism has impact, so we have to be focused and seriously on those things for the future to make sure that tourism is still something to do for everybody, and it stays a great industry.
Je vais m'arrêter là pour le partage d'écran. On n'a plus beaucoup de temps, je crois, malheureusement, pour interagir. Normalement, dans la salle, vous avez une représentante de ATR en présentiel qui sera là avec vous toute la journée. Elle s'appelle Léa Bonan. Elle pourra peut-être se lever si elle est là. Et puis demain, je réinterviens sur la question justement du voyage local, du tourisme de proximité demain matin. On pourra aussi continuer d'échanger ensemble. C'est très lié au voyage responsable et bas carbone. J'avais écrit un article dans l'éco-touristique en France sur la tentation du local ou le syndrome du poisson rouge. Je vous invite à le lire si vous voulez prolonger aussi la découverte de mes travaux.
As a final conclusion, I would say I will be present tomorrow for something about local tourism, and also we have a representative of our organization among us. Her name is Leah, and well, you can talk to her if you want. And also, I wrote an article about the redfish syndrome recently. You can read it. It's interesting. That's my conclusion. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thanks a lot, Julien Bigo. We have time just 2 minutes for 2 or 3 questions. On a perdu la connexion? Ça revient. D'accord. Do you have any questions? So, on sent que, en français, après je traduis, on sent qu'on est à un point de bascule aujourd'hui, hein, puisqu'il y a, vous avez parlé de 16 entreprises qui sont bien engagées. C'est pas beaucoup, mais il y a un mouvement de fond qui s'enclenche, d'une part, et d'autre part, après, c'est toute la question de la prise de conscience des voyageurs aussi. Ça, c'est un gros élément qui, dans les faits aujourd'hui, comme vous le soulignez, ça se traduit pas encore pleinement dans les pratiques des voyageurs.
On a eu un problème. Dans les années 2000, il y a clairement eu du greenwashing. Tout le monde connaît ce terme. Dans les années 2010, on a eu un problème presque aussi grave. C'est le greenwashing, l'éco-chuchotement. C'est-à-dire beaucoup d'entreprises commençaient à vraiment se mettre sur le chemin du tourisme responsable, mais ne le partageaient pas, parfois même en interne et encore pire, en externe à leurs clients. Et aujourd'hui, vraiment, ça a un peu évolué depuis 2-3 ans. Les entreprises sont un peu moins pudiques. Mais nous, on engage vraiment les entreprises, même celles qui ne sont pas très engagées, à partager beaucoup plus avec leurs collaborateurs, leurs fournisseurs, leurs clients, leurs engagements, même modestes. Parce que c'est comme ça qu'on va mettre le sujet à l'ordre du jour et c'est comme ça qu'on va être challengé par nos clients à qui on va afficher le tourisme responsable. Ils vont peut-être nous démontrer qu'on n'est pas à la hauteur de cet affichage, mais ça va nous challenger. À force de ne pas en parler, le sujet, c'est le meilleur moyen qu'il n'avance pas.
On est là pour ça aujourd'hui. Is there any question?
Oui, bonjour, Julien. Je suis Susana Conde de l'Espagne. On se connaît il y a quelques années parce qu'on est une agence de voyage spécialisée au tourisme durable en Espagne. Et on travaille depuis 13 ans. Et aussi, on était très intéressants sur tout ça, sur les changements climatiques. Et je voulais vous demander s'il y a la possibilité de savoir les critères que vous avez sur les labels et sur les changements climatiques. Si c'est possible de les voir sur votre website ou je sais pas où. Ou si vous pouvez m'envoyer par mail les critères ou l'information sur tout ça. S'il vous plaît, oui. Merci.
Bonjour Susanna, oui, je me souviens bien de vous. La base du tourisme responsable, je le disais tout à l'heure, c'est la communication aussi. et la transparence. Donc tous les critères, ils sont accessibles sur le site d'ATR. Avec ATD, le réseau interprofessionnel, on va publier le 2 juin prochain, dans 15 jours, le guide des labels français de tourisme durable. Il y a une trentaine de labels qui ont été évalués. Certains sont très engagés sur le climat, c'est le cas du label ATR. D'autres le sont beaucoup moins. Il y a des labels généralistes pour tous les métiers. Il y a d'autres labels comme ATR qui sont spécialisés sur un métier, comme le tour operating. On a un autre label que j'ai dirigé avant qui s'appelle ATES, Association Tourisme Équitable et Solidaire. C'est vrai que c'est la base d'un label, c'est vraiment de publier les critères, le cahier des charges, c'est très important. Vous avez tout sur le site internet.
All the criteria for the certification and the label is available on the website of ATR. It's the French label, so you can find there all the information and the reports that you will need. Est-ce qu'il y a encore? Is there any question? Yes.
Bonjour à tous, je suis Daniela. Je suis Daniela et je suis la propriétaire d'une maison super durable en Sardaigne. Et nous aimerions savoir si votre label c'est disponible pour l'Italie aussi, ou seulement en France.
On travaille beaucoup avec l'association italienne de tourisme responsable, AITR, depuis des années. C'est pas un label, AITR, c'est une association. Pour répondre à votre question, le label ATR, il est que pour les opérateurs français, mais on travaille avec des réceptifs, des agences dans le monde entier. Et on a un partenariat avec Travel Life, on a un système de passerelle entre le label international Travel Life et le label ATR. Donc, on peut vous recommander Travel Life, par exemple, mais il y a d'autres labels qui existent, comme Cert, Green Globe, d'autres qui peuvent exister en Italie. Et particulièrement en Sardaigne, nous, on a une agence de voyage qui est membre d'ATD, qui s'appelle Sardaigne en Liberté, et qui est un des réceptifs de nos tour opérateurs. On travaille avec la Balaguer, par exemple.
There is a partnership between ATR and Italy via the association AITR, and ATR has also a partnership with Travel Life. And tomorrow we will have a training with Travel Life. Anastasia is here. She's representative of Travel Life in Amsterdam. So you can talk with her if you want. Is there any question? One more question? No question on the web? Okay. So it's time for a coffee break. So thanks a lot again, Julien Bigo.
You're welcome.
And we will see you tomorrow. Thank you.
See you tomorrow. Thank you.
And also big thanks to Edouard Lagnès that has ensured the translation. It's not obvious because it's a long time he didn't do this kind of translation. Thank you. Time for a coffee break now. So this third part of the conference now is dedicated to testimonies of SMEs. So I will ask to the company, is Discovery Trains present?
I'm present online.
Yes, sorry. It's Tatiana. Huh?
Yes, that's me.
Okay. Can we give the floor to Tatiana? Okay, it's coming. Perfect. Thank you, Tatiana.
Good afternoon.
You have the floor.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Tatiana, and I represent Discovery Trains, a travel agency based in Paris and majoring in trips by train all over the world. The company was founded in 2007 by a big fan of trains, Simon Stone, and initially promoted railway trips in the UK, the USA, and Canada. But as the company developed, other destinations appeared, including a number of European countries, Asia, South Africa, and even Australia. Today, our small team continues looking for opportunities to improve the existing offer and make it more sustainable. This is why we applied to participate in tourism project. As for our current offer, the top 3 most requested destinations at the moment are Switzerland, Italy, and Portugal. The other European countries, such as Spain, Germany, Austria, Hungary, the Czech Republic, as well as Nordic countries, Finland, Norway, Sweden, are also in demand. And our aim is to develop a 100% train offer for each destination. At the moment, we focus on ensuring domestic and international train connections for these destinations. We encourage the use of public transport instead of private car or bus transfers. Namely, we look for optimal distance between train station, hotel, and city center. We advise the booking of city tourist cards that, apart from museum or restaurant discounts, include a free use of public transport. We propose walking guided tours instead of tours by bus, if possible, and we integrate a wide variety of railway passes into our offer. These railway passes, for example, Interrail Pass, which is available in 33 European countries, propose discounts or sometimes even free use of European trains for a certain period of time. We also prioritize long-stay journeys and trains instead of planes where it is possible, with a given time limit and budget. If our travelers feel at ease with reservations for a city stay, we provide our assistance with train trip planning and train tickets reservation only. Due to the increasing popularity of overnight trains, we've seen the corresponding slide in the first presentation today. We promote this option as well, so our clients can spend more time in each city and optimize their budget without paying a night in a hotel. If the use of international trains is not possible, we opt for the airline companies that work on reducing their carbon print, as well as direct flights, which are sometimes more expensive but more environmentally friendly at the same time. Our current projects include Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, the USA, and Canada. We already issue tickets, train tickets for these destinations for travel within these destinations, but we are thinking how we can make this offer more sustainable. Today, we propose several programs, including regular and special trains. Of course, we think about French domestic train offer, as people tend to choose short distance destinations within the country. On top of that, it's a great opportunity to attract clients from other European countries who want to discover France in an unusual way. We also plan to develop a green hotel offer as well as eco-transfer offer when public transport infrastructure cannot be replaced, when it cannot be replaced by public transfers. Homestay accommodations and meals are also an alternative that we are planning to develop. And we are also looking forward to develop partnership with various railway associations because it can give opportunity to get access to a great network of train fans, as well as with organizations working to help local community. Apart from several technical aspects, our main challenges for sustainable trip offer at the moment are the balance between the price, distance, and sustainable trip implementation, as well as sensibilization of our clients. Well, we need to prepare our clients to such kind of trips without punishing them with longer distances on trains or with higher prices. We see it as a big opportunity for us to improve our service and place on the tourist market. This is why we are glad to participate in this project. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer. Thank you very much for your attention. I invite you to visit our website, discoverytrains.net. Our latest version is available in French only, but we are open to international offers as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Tatiana. So please stay online. We will take the question after the presentation of 3 other SMEs. Okay? So I call now La Route des Voyages, Noélia.
Hello, good morning. I'm Noélia from La Route des Voyages. What is the Voyage? It's a tour operator, and we've been on the market for 28 years. And basically, we are a bunch of travelers that we create individual travels for our clients, taking into account most of the time the budget, the restraints, the dreams, what they want for those holidays they're looking for. And then we start to, from the beginning, 28 years ago, sustainability was in our DNA. So we start to see how we can manage that and just see real things happen in our agency. So how we do that? So how do we do that? So we divide all the creation of the trip in different steps. At the beginning, 20 years ago, we start with the compensation of carbon. And that was because we knew all the travels that we create, they have carbon. And so we need to compensate them. So we have some associations to plant some forests in Madagascar, in Bolivia, in Peru. Then this idea evolved as we realized, as Mitro said, it wasn't really decarbonized actually, because we couldn't control it. We didn't know where the money was going, and it was very difficult to control it. So we passed through another idea. That was the solidarity contribution. It was more in the long term, and we were thinking more to contribute with help the environment, not only the environment, but the communities, the lands, to really develop them to have a better life. So we start to create put money in schools, in the orphans, and more in the people than in the landscape, actually. So that is with the money of our clients and ourselves. That means that every client that travel with the La Route de Voyage is paying 30 euros each person in each travel. So it is, if it is a family of 4, everyone is paying 30 euros and the company is paying 20 euros and we have 50 euros that is going all the money is going to the associations that we choose, very small associations all over the world, and we can visit them and control them. That was more easy that planned forest for us. Also, that was the first step. And the second step was that we created a chart for empower our partners in all the countries. So that chart was more like a guide for them to tell them how we want them to work for us, like not have children working for them, that the guide has to be really good pay, that they need to go to places, send our clients to places they don't have handicraft from China, for example, if you're not in China, and those kind of things. Well, it's a very long list. And some of our partners, they say no, that they couldn't do it, so we didn't work anymore with them. But most of them, they say yes. So we have that like when I started in the company, like 15 years ago, and it is growing, so it's very good. Every time that we develop a new country, we ask for the same things. And so that is very good. So we have the partners and something given to the society at the moment. And then we start to really tear apart every step of the trip to see how we can minimize in every step the impact, not only in the climate, but also in the places and the different countries and the people. And so we start with the flights, so how we can choose a better company. And then we start with the partners and how to instruct them to choose a better excursions. And for them, we need to know very well the destination, actually. And that is money, because we are paying for our own travels. So the company organize fun trips that are only for us. And so we pay our own travels and we go to the countries and we seek for new kind of see the same place. For example, in Machu Picchu, everyone in all the guides in Lonely Planet, Rutar, everywhere is written that you have to go at 6 o'clock in the morning because the sunrise is very beautiful. But they don't say that it's 2,000 people. They're thinking the same thing. So we went there, we realized there were a bunch of people there, and we didn't think that was the best for our clients. So we realized that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was nobody, and then you can really enjoy the place. So since like 10 years ago, we start to sell only at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for our clients. Even when they want to go at 6 o'clock, we explain them why it's not a good idea. So the human being is very intelligent, so they accept that, and it's not very difficult to convince them, our clients, to tell them, well, this is not a good idea. Another example was in Egypt, that I'm a product and the manager of the country. So my challenge was really to prove that in this country that's very contaminated, how we can do another kind of tourism. And so the best challenge, the huge challenge was the Nile cruise, because everyone knows there is a big boat, and then the big boats are very polluted, and then they have the small boat. But trying to find another way, I just found another small boat, really, really small, just a private way to travel. And it's very like a camping boat. It's not for all our clients, but at least they have this boat doesn't have an engine, and at least they have another way of travel. We can give them to our clients another way of travel, and it's not the classic one. And I believe that we can force them push them to other kind of actions when we show them there is another way of travel also. So, and the other step that we are still trying to transform is the client itself. We believe as a tour operator, we have a responsibility, and because we sell the trips that we design, that we create, so we have the chance to choose with whom we work. And so the client has to understand that a few things it's not possible anymore to do it, like go to SeaWorld or do, I don't know, like swimming with the dolphins, those kind of things that are not very good for the planet. We have the chance in our company to say, no, we are not selling. If you want, you have the free day and you do whatever you want, but we are not selling it anymore. So we believe that this education would put a seed in their brains, and will grow. And probably they will took the excursion anyways, going to United States, in Florida, and they will want to see the orca jumping. Well, probably they will do, but probably also when they were seeing that, they will think that it's finally not a good idea. So we need to educate. We think that we have the responsibility to educate all of clients without make them feel guilty about it. There are many ways of travel, but we need to, that's what we believe, the responsibility to educate our clients. So our goal is to have all our products in a sustainable way in a few years only.
Thanks a lot. Please if you have any question, keep them. We have now a presentation from Odyssey agency. Salome Botois, she's online. Normally.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect. Okay.
Just 1 second. Okay, we see you now. You can start. Thank you, Salome.
Perfect. So hello everyone. Good morning. So I'm Salome. I represent Odyssey. So we are a French travel agency based in Paris, which was created by Romain and Nicolas, our two co-founders, 2018. So we are a small team of around 10 people, and we are specialized in immersive travels in France and abroad, so mainly for French-speaking clients. So what do I mean by immersion? We can say the goal for our trips is to travel more slowly, to limit the number of stops that we do, but rather to get really immersed into the country or the area we visit. For each trip, we try to find like a special angle to discover the destination. For example, we can offer in France to spend a week in the life of a shepherd to discover its work. To visit the sacred valleys of Inca with a shaman, or to spend a week, for example, in Greece to study the wild dolphins' behavior with marine biologists, for example. We also developed this year a very new area, B2B, to organize some seminars in France and abroad for companies between 30 and 300, 400 people. So our specificity for these seminars is to link our fiber in travel and to offer some tailor-made services and sustainable original activities. So we can feel on this area of seminars that a lot of clients actually ask for responsible activities and taking the train and not taking the plane, for example. So about what we already have put in place, so we try to put in place our choices in travel production. So by the very concept of immersion, we naturally tend to limit the number of stops. We also prioritize soft ways of traveling during the travels, partners that are already engaged into sustainable practices. We absolutely avoid some not responsible activities. We collaborate also for some of our experiences with some local NGOs. For example, in Costa Rica, we work with an animal shelter or some local projects involving local communities. And additionally, with COVID, we had to adapt because at the beginning we were proposing of international travels, and we developed a lot our offer in France, creating some local experiences. And also we collaborated with the Regional Natural Parks Federation in France. So the goal was to create very small trips of a few days in 15 national parks in France, highlighting sustainable development actors and local knowledge, very typical of the area. So also previously, we just stopped working with them actually. We were collaborating with Pure Project for the carbon footprint compensation. But we realized that we don't really have a visibility of, where the funds go and how they are used. So we would like to properly study a new project, especially what we discussed this morning. And in parallel, we just launched a new project because we wanted to really have the control on how the money is used. So we created a project with young teenagers in France to go with them. Actually, it's our team to go with them for a few days on a trip to sensibilize them to the sustainable development and do some activities with them. So for that, we take a certain amount of 20 euros on our B2C trips and 1% of the amount of on the seminar trips that go directly for that project. And for our future projects, so actually we are working with this training to develop that, but we are currently planning to develop an action plan basing ourselves on the ATR certification criteria. So our three main axes of action would be to act internally at Odyssey to sensibilize the team, to work more with our providers in that direction, and to also to communicate and work more with the clients to adapt our offer. And so we are currently working on that. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Salome.
Thank you.
So now I will leave the floor to Revlis. Axel is late. Okay. So Chanty Travel, next presentation. You have a PowerPoint.
Ouais.
Hello, everybody. I'm Manon from Chanty Travel. Chanty Travel is a French travel agency specialized on tailor-made trips in Asia. We have been created in 2005 by two Frenchies, and we are selling since 1 year also South America with another travel agency called Tierra Latina. Today, I would like to present you two examples of actions we are doing in Chanty, one internally and one externally. So the first one, we discussed it during the break a few minutes ago with the French travel agent, is regarding the online storage. Actually, I'm not sure everybody is aware of that, but the emails sent every day and every year represent a large amount of CO2 consumption. So you have the details of the CO2 emissions that it represents. So during the month of April and May, we've launched an email reduction campaign inside our teams in Asia. And this challenge was to delete as much as possible unnecessary emails we all keep for nothing. So thanks to this challenge, We reduced by 23% our storage of emails. So it's quite huge, actually. Externally, we're also doing compensation or contribution with a carbon compensation fee for each and every trip we are selling. So the calculation was based on 12 nights, 13 days for 3 packs. And it includes hotel electricity consumption, 150 kilometers per day with a private car, private transport, and one-way national flight, which was more or less the average of what we were selling among all our destinations. And this represents for every trip approximately 2 tons of CO2. Which has been calculated estimated at 48 euro for 3 packs. So the carbon compensation fee for one trip is estimated to €1.23 per pax per day. We've implemented this carbon compensation fee in 2019-20, and thanks to that we collected 38,000 euros. Which we've chosen to donate to 5 different associations in Asia. 3 of them are involved in the reforestation. So the first one is Sankalp Taru, which is an association in India. We've planted 1,000 trees. Same with Friends of the National Parks Foundation, which is an Indonesian association. With them, we've planted 1,500 trees. Same with another association, Himalayan Institute of Alternatives in India as well. With them, we've planted 3,000 trees. And then the 2 other associations are not linked with the reforestation actions. So the first one is Karuna Chechen. It's an Indian association. With them, we've trained 4 women on how to drive an electric rickshaw. So rickshaw is that. And more than only training them, we also help them to acquire their first electric rickshaw. And the last association is Almost Even Farm, which is a farm that is doing permaculture in Nepal, and we help them to acquire some equipment to support their permaculture farm. That's it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now you have, if you have any question or any reaction on the different testimonies. No. Marion, do we have any question online? One question.
It's a question from Montfleur. Hello, Tatiana, Noelia, and Salome. Regarding customers, do you still have normal customers, or has your customer changed to customers with more responsible profile? Did you feel a change in the clientele with a change in your offer?
Tatiana and Salome, it's one question for you if you are still online.
Yes, so I can answer from my part. I would say that basically most of our clients, they are all train fans, people who take trains for ecological reasons, people who cannot take planes for health or other personal reasons. But yet there are quite a lot of people who are looking for, first of all, who are looking for unusual way to explore the destination, but as they start preparing the travel project, they realize that it's a very important ecological issue, and I would say that the profile changes not rapidly, but still we can notice this tendency.
On my side to answer, yeah, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes. Yeah, on my side, I would say we have a typology of client that is very sensitive of questions. So yeah, I would say it's almost systematic questions about the activities to check if it's like down in the respect of animals or relation. And I feel, yeah, it's, I don't know if there was a progression because maybe I'm not the best to answer that question on time. But yeah, almost each client has a sensibility to this kind of questions on our side.
Yes, another question for Manon, I think. I was from Marie-Caroline Texier. I was wondering how do you determine the cost per tons of CO2 compensation? Good question indeed.
Thank you, Marie, for these questions. Actually, I've not been involved in the calculation of the CO2 compensation fee since the beginning of the project, so I don't have the answer.
Sure. Any other question or reaction? Okay. So now I will leave the floor to you. So genuine Spain. Yeah?
Sorry, Maxime. Maxime. Sorry, I had an answer, but I don't know how to write on the chat.
Gracias. Ouais. Bonjour à tous de nouveau. Je vais essayer de m'exprimer en anglais, sinon un mix entre l'anglais et le français. I'm the founder and the director of Genuine Spain. We are a incoming travel agency with 13 years of experience in sustainable tourism in Spain. We were pioneer, and we were working hard in sustainability and in other aspects around responsibility and sustainability. And we were the first travel agency in Spain certified with Travel Life. For that, we are in this project because we want to renew our certification with Travel Life and include other kind of certifications. And from the beginning, we were working in around several aspects of sustainability, environmental sustainability, social, economic, and cultural, of course. But it's true that in 2019, we have realized that we had more responsibility about climate change, no? And we have realized too that in Spain, near nobody was working in this issue in tourism sector. And then, as we were prepared to develop more our strategy of mitigation, adaptation to climate change, we started to update our strategy of mitigation and adaptation, and to develop a new line of products about climate-friendly trips in Spain. No, this was Pioneer 2. Then our strategy, you can see in our website, it's everything there, our strategy of sustainability and our strategy of against climate change. And especially, I want to remark that for us, the most important is to reduce the emissions and to include measures or good practices of adaptation, especially in a country as Spain, because we think that for us it will be a good option of competitiveness with the other kind of incoming travel agencies there in Spain. And for us, the upsighting is the last option. Okay. Then how we do this? About is true that especially around the 60 or 70% of the emissions in a trip in Spain too is related with the transport, of course. Then when we have trips to Spain without to use plane, of course, and without to use plane during your trip in Spain, we try to use other kind of public transport. It's not easy in Spain. The reality is totally different, no? With another example of countries as Netherlands or Germany. In Spain, it's not easy. Now we have another more problem. That is that now the trains are more expensive than planes to travel, no? Around the country. Then for us, it's a new difficulty. And yes, we try to include everything, no? This kind of sustainable mobility, but as we know, it's not about the transport. We need more innovation and more technology, and this is not in our hand. We try to work more with our providers. Then we are working especially with the Ecotourism Club in Spain. It's the main club of ecotourism in Spain, promoted by the Secretary of Tourism of the country. And we are working more with our local providers, no? Small entrepreneurs in the rural and natural areas, that they are working in a sustainable way, but not so much about climate emissions, no? Carbon emissions. Then we are trying to reduce more our emissions through our local providers and to green, no? The cadena de valor. I don't know how it's in English. And at the end, when it's not possible to reduce more, of course, we do upsighting projects. Another problem that we have in Spain is that the projects of upsighting approved by the Minister of Ecological Transition are all of them. There are now 16, and all of them are about three plants. But in our opinion, these kind of projects are not the best, and it's possible not to compensate with another projects more holistic, with other kind of actions about agricultura regenerativa, about things in oceans, no? The ocean is the best carbon sink. Then we are trying to develop a new project of upsighting with the Ecotourism Club in Spain, no? Including all these kind of actions that is more than plant trees. That, in our opinion, is not enough, no? To compensate. For ending, I will show you a little bit, because we have from 2019 this new line of climate-friendly trips in Spain. Especially, before the COVID, we were working a lot with travelers from the States and from Canada. But it's true that we were thinking about to change a little bit to promote more our travel, our trips in European markets and markets from the near countries. And now we are working more with travelers from Germany, from Netherlands, from Italy, from north of Spain, North Europe, and too from France, finally. But we have this kind of trips around Spain, net zero, but including two projects about mitigation and adaptation, and including 2 destinations and observatories about the effects and about the impacts of negative impacts of climate change in Spain. It's very interesting, this kind of trips. They are developed especially for companies with responsabilidad social, I don't know how it's in English, this. And yes, especially for these kind of markets from the north of Europe, that they are more conscious about all this kind. And well, we have several kind of products in this way. For example, we have other kind of programs around Spain for traveling with electric car. We are developing more and more and more, especially for this kind of markets. Okay, and we are in a project with the Ecotourism Club in Spain, developing 2 ecotourism climate friendly. And I wanted to include something more, but I don't remember. I don't know. Maybe you have any question, and I can explain better. Thank you so much. Merci bien.
Thanks a lot. So I will call now Group Los Telares.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ana Valien. I come from Los Telares. We are a company that has more than 50 years working in tourism on La Gomera. We have 2 lines of work. We have lodgings on the northern part of La Gomera. They're mainly focused on people who want to do ecotourism and who want to enjoy nature and hiking. This would be the lodgings line. And we also have, another line, which is the ethnographic park of La Gomera. It's a farm. It's an eco farm. We are certified. And it's of local produce. We also have an ethnographic collection and a museum, a shop where you can buy produce from La Gomera on the Canary Islands, and also a restaurant, which we source from our farm directly. So we are what you could call a big fish on a small pond. I just put this because I always wanted to use this phrase. And we are located on La Gomera, which you might know. We're on the Canary Islands. We're one of the smallest islands. We are connected with Tenerife by ferry, by flight. It's just 50 minutes away from Tenerife. And the reason why most people come to La Gomera is because of the national park. We have 10% of our surface is a national park. It's a protected figure. So it's a Lowland rainforest. It's the remnant of a forest that existed all through the Mediterranean or the tertiary era. So it has a lot of interest also, not only because we want to conserve it, but also scientifically. There are also other 17 protected areas on the island, which means that we have been preserving our nature for quite some time now, and even the local administration, which is a feat because not always easy. And for us, we would define sustainability as taking care of what for now for us is a fragile natural landscape, and whose conservation, especially for a national park, is at odds with a touristic activity, which, by the way, is one of the things that happens when you make a national park somewhere. A lot of people want to go there. So it shouldn't really work like that, but it happens. So you have to, make use of it and try to preserve it, regardless of the amount of visitors that want to come. And what we do on sustainability, we do not work alone. We never worked alone. We have been 50 years here. We started on our own, yes, but we have had many increase on the touristic sector on La Gomera. And luckily, right now, we are working with NGOs, with local administrations, and TouriSME has found a spot there,
with the Ecotourism Club of Spain, and Atusos, which works with the Europac, the Sustainable Tourism Chapter in protected areas in Garajonay. And with Atusos, the local association, there is a project that is what we would like to talk to you about. It started on 2009. And yes, it is a carbon offset project. But in our case, it became this type of project because we had visitors who were concerned about their carbon footprint, visitors who were recurring visitors to La Gomera, and they started saying, okay, I love going there, but I'm thinking of not going there anymore because I have to take a plane. And so we started the market, and we saw that, yes, flight companies can compensate your carbon footprint, but they do it somewhere else. They do it in Asia, they do it also in Africa and Latin America. So what we did is we created a project that does it locally. So there is a part of the island that is between the 300 meters height and the 750 meters high, which has a local type of forest. It's a Thermophilus, I think that's the name, Thermophilus forest. It is similar to the Mediterranean forest, and it has disappeared in some of the areas of the island. It actually encircles the national park. And what we do is we invest on recreating that original forest and on, replacing whatever is there right now, mostly crops or abandoned fields, with a very healthy forest. Here's an example of how it works for our travelers. So you have an online calculator, and no, I don't know how they did this. So you calculate your origin, you're going to La Gomera, and then this would be what you would emit on CO2 on your flight only. And it has been calculated that for that you have to do a 33 euros donation. And so you can donate that to the project. It will be used on the plantations, also on cocoons for the trees, so we don't have to go all the time to put water on them, so they can grow healthy for some years. You can also, when you're locally there, you can join one of the expeditions that do the planting, so you can do it yourself. No need to donate for that. You can do either of them. And if you have a field that is eligible for that, you can also allow the project to plant on your field so that you contribute in a way to this, this improvement of the ecosystem of the island. And I think that is all of it. You have our Instagram here, also the Facebook, if you want to check us out. And thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. The SME Revlis, but I think he had problem with the train. Okay, it's not still arrived. So it's time for questions, if you have any. Any question online? No? No question. Okay. So I will welcome now Mr. Alan Vela, which is the project advisor at ESMA. ESMA is the European Innovation Council and SMEs Executive Agencies, which is an agency from the European Commission. And it is this agency that has financed the tourist project and other similar projects in Europe. So welcome, Mr. Alan Vela. Do we have Mr. Alan Vela online?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon. Bon après-midi.
Thank you, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfectly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I actually had a question for the last presenter. Unfortunately, I I was not in a position to look into all the presentations. I only caught the last two, Genuine Spain and the last presenter. And it's intriguing what these colleagues are doing here, because of course this is an area which really interests me. I have been involved in sustainability for a good chunk of my life, basically. And I did have a question for the last presenter, because what she said, I also come, by the way, from a small island environment. Just like La Gomera, there are issues of insularity, etc. So it's a situation which I understand completely. But my question is effectively, it seems from the mechanism that you have put online there, one of the last slides where you were showing that a flight from Paris would cost 33 euros. It seems that the onus is on actually the consumer only to pay. That is the 33 euros which come out of that particular leg there is for the consumer to decide voluntarily or not voluntarily to make a contribution. At least this is what I understood. I'm wondering whether you have any such mechanism, or whether you are also putting pressure on the actual flight companies to contribute directly also, apart from the consumer.
On my case, I don't think I've ever gotten. Yes, it's me. Thank you. So I don't think I've ever managed to get from any flight company, not even a refund for a flight I didn't take. So being La Gomera, I don't know if you've seen it, very small, 60 kilometers wide. I'm afraid I don't have any leverage on them. But if I had, I would absolutely give them a call.
And you are from the private sector, right? You're not public sector.
Yes. No. We are associated also with the public sector, but we are privately owned, and well, it's a family company. So okay. Yes, we are private, and we have worked very deeply intertwined with the with the public sector. But we are mostly working against them, not with them, because it's very difficult to coordinate. I don't know whether you know in Spain how administrations work, but well, it's sometimes they do work very well. The national park actually works very well, and they're very deeply settled into sustainability within their area. But it's a work in progress.
That's great. Thank you very much. Very intriguing, welcome. Very interesting also. As I said, it's an area which really interests me. As you were told, I am the project advisor from EISMEA, which is the agency, the European agency that is coordinating this project, where we financed this particular project to the tune of 1 million euros, basically, and it is through this project which you are there for this very interesting seminar this morning. Incidentally, as I said, unfortunately, I couldn't make it all, but the two presentations which I heard, the Genuine Spain and this last one, were very interesting, good practices in this field, and I have no doubt that it has been a very interesting morning for all of you interested in this topic. My short address here today is relating to two sides of the coin, which is basically to the consortia members that are present there, and to you, all the participants, all the SMEs benefiting from our financing too. Because the main thrust of this project, of course, is to help assist the SMEs in gathering additional knowledge in this field, and also effectively to apply it, because this is the most important thing, to go back home with ideas, with indications of what you can do to better the situation, to provide more sustainability within your daily field of operations. And this is exactly what this project is all about. This is exactly what this call is all about, because TouriSME has won, let's call it a concours, they call it in French. They have won this particular means to benefit from our funding. As I said, it's 1 million euros in total. And TouriSME is there assisting capacity building. It's there assisting knowledge transfer. It's there to assist scaling up activities. It's there to facilitate the sustainable growth of SMEs. And these 4 particular areas which I've mentioned here are all areas which are key and which are very central to what you probably heard all morning, at least to what I heard in these past 2 presentations, because they fit very well within the context of carbon offsetting, of responsible tourism, of decarbonization of travel offers, for instance, which are the themes which are very central to the seminar which you have had this morning. So this is one particular area which I think you stand to benefit as SMEs, as participants there. You stand to benefit from these because, of course, these are very central for your daily chores, daily activities, which will help you better your sustainability in this field. But I also would like to open up your awareness, if indeed this is needed, to additional opportunities, because this could be indeed an eye-opener for you, but there are other opportunities for SMEs at European level, other ones which facilitate your growth, which could possibly help you gain access to finance, access to markets, for instance, also. And within this field, allow me to mention other opportunities which we deal with internally at EISMEA, which is the agency I work there for, not only these type of initiatives, calls, such as the one, this tourism call, which TouriSME has benefited from, but also other initiatives such as Erasmus for young entrepreneurs, for instance. So if you're a young entrepreneur, incidentally, I was in Tenerife 3 weeks ago when TouriSME had their meetings there, their matchmaking events, etc. And there was effectively a young entrepreneur who had benefited from this Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs scheme, and he went back home and he decided to develop itineraries, specific itineraries with the contacts he had, with the ideas he brought back home, to allow a particular itinerary in northern Spain, in northern Tenerife, to come up with tour itineraries, day trips, weekend trips, etc., built specifically on sustainabilities. And this he did after an Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs exchange, whereby he went to other countries, he got to know what the other countries are doing, he kept the contacts, he developed these contacts, he developed his networking system, and nowadays he's approaching an independent activity as a micro SME, basically, within the field of sustainable tourism. And this was facilitated, of course, by Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs. But there are also other areas, such as the Enterprise Europe Network, which is a network available for all SMEs to facilitate their growth, their networking, their access to finance, for instance. So it's a network which can give advice on what type of activities you could be looking at, because we acknowledge in Brussels, as you know, I'm based in Brussels, we acknowledge that SMEs sometimes need that extra push to be able to grow beyond the confines of what is their day-to-day business, what they operate in on a day-to-day level, and especially to go outside the, let's call it, the comfort zone, which is the area they know best. So if they are to grow if they are to go beyond their confines, their daily activities, sometimes it helps to have some professional advice, and that is what Enterprise Europe Network is there for, and certainly available for tourism SMEs. On the other side, you have in front of you some members of the consortia themselves participating, and they too are doing their utmost to facilitate the growth of SMEs. We have organized this call together with Michelle and Beatrice from Consulta, together with the Institut Paris-Région, which I believe are one of the main partners in the project too. So thank you very much to Marion and colleagues for the invitation today to participate. And they too are trying their best to facilitate this growth in the areas that the partners are involved in the areas that they contribute to directly. And it is good, it is very nice today to have this follow-up meeting on what I've had in Tenerife, basically meeting the Spanish SMEs. Here, I believe it's a mixed audience online and participating there. Not only French SMEs are participating, but it's good to have this European dimension. This European dimension where, of course, we're not focusing on one particular area here in Europe. We're focusing on all Europe. I understand well the problems that the two presenters had, because I myself come from a small island, but it's not only islands, it's not only about islands, it's all about Europe. And Europe means all Europe. So it's transnational activity going beyond what you operate in, but having these links with other particular countries and destinations and regions across Europe. And that is what we're all about doing here. That is what the project is all about. That is what all the co-financing by the European Union is all about. Facilitate this exchange, this growth opportunity that you might take back with you. And I hope you do learn something from all these good practices. For me, it has been an eye-opener, these two presentations I've listened to, because it shows that there's enthusiasm, it shows that there's eagerness also to work within this field. And small as small you may be, as there was in one of the slides, a small fish in a big pond, something like this. I can't remember it exactly, but the meaning was basically as small as you might be, you still can contribute, basically. And this is what we hope everybody will benefit from. So thank you once again for your invitation. I also note with satisfaction it's being held at the Maison du Zéro Déchet. So it's a wonderful name, actually, the House of No Waste, basically. It's a firm commitment for us all, an eye-opener for us all in this particular context which you have been looking into today of decarbonization, of carbon offsetting, and of responsible tourism. Thank you once again for your invitation, and I hope you have a fruitful afternoon also continuing this particular seminar. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Vela. Thank you also for reminding us the opportunity of the Erasmus for young entrepreneurs. So it's a nice opportunity for the present SMEs develop the skills of young people. So now we have two last presentations. We will make them short, and then we have a buffet. Okay. So please, now we welcome Mrs. Anne Gomez from Choose Paris region.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here this morning. I have a very long presentation, so I'm going to make it quick. Okay, I am from the Choose Paris region, which is a regional agency. We address only foreign companies who wants to set up their business in Paris region. So first, I will briefly go to not a very sexy part, which is how to set up a company in France. So it doesn't work. Yeah. So this is who we are. You will have the presentation because there are a lot of text. Sorry. Yeah, that's one. You go. No. No. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So how to set up a company? Local bank account, which is very important. You need to anticipate that. It was already challenging before COVID. Now it's very, very important to have your bank with you. Your banker should be one of your best friends if you want to open a company and be safe. So the bank we are working with, so if you want to open a company in Paris region, we can help you to connect with the bank. We can help you to prepare your file, and we can help as well with a bookkeeper and lawyers to choose your status and to see the taxes issue in France. Then you will need a place to work. So there is the 369 classic lease in France to rent a desk. But now we have a lot of co-working brands all around Paris region. So we can connect you with them. And if you choose a place outside Paris, of course, it's cheaper. And so we have a lot of business center. This one are in Charles de Gaulle airport area. And just a domiciliation, if you just need a domiciliation to open your business, is possible as well. If you need to hire people, then it's we can help you to get you in touch with what we call Pôle emploi in French. It's the employment agency. So my colleague Agnès can connect you with them, with a person who speaks English. But still there will be language barrier. So it's better if you speak French, of course, or if you hire someone who speaks French. And the relocation, if you have a member of your team who is going to move to Paris, we can help. There is no visa issue with you as you are European, but we can help for that as well. So if you have children, or we have a lot of international schools in Paris region. For the private tax, for healthcare, we have social security, so we can help. We can help to introduce you, to show you that we have a lot of foreign communities in Paris region. So, and we have a platform now to connect you directly with our partners, banks, lawyers, bookkeeper. A lot of guides that you can download, a lot of figures. It's on our website. And then just a few overlook of the ecosystem, tourism ecosystem in Paris region. So why choose Paris region? Of course, a lot of business opportunities and a lot of tourists in Paris region. So we are financed by the regional council, which has a tourism policy based on sustainability now. So there is a new regional roadmap for tourism. You will have the link. It's a lot of homework, but it's the strategy of the region. And for that, we have a tool, which is a financial support, which is the Fonds Régional du Tourisme. Again, it's in French. And we have another financial tool, which is the SEM Île-de-France. And there is another regional agency dedicated to tourism. This one, it's the Comité Régional du Tourisme, 2 websites, and there is one for professionals, and you will find them a lot of data. about tourism, a lot of maps, and 2 contrats de destination, which one with the Impressionism, and a new one which is Explore Paris, because we do a lot of actions for local tourism. And so this is a way to say to people, there's not only Paris, there is the suburbs. So in this destination, in this website, you will find addresses to go outside Paris. Figures about tourism, of course, it was before COVID. A lot of hotels. We have a lot of demand for hotels, new hotels in Paris, but we don't have real estate for that. So it's quite challenging for them, but we are trying to connect them with promoters and territories, because we do a lot of territorial pedagogy. So we help people to connect with all the layers of the French millefeuille. We say horizontal fragmentations. So we are lucky in Paris because we have a lot of places. Like we are going to have a new one thanks to the regional council, a lot of museum, of course. And very important for the tourist is the new Grand Paris Express, which will be the new infrastructure of transportation, public transportation in Paris. And there is a place where you can go to understand this project, very huge one, which is La Fabrique du Métro. It's free and you can go there. It's at Saint-Ouen. And it's very useful to understand the philosophy and the ambition of the Grand Paris Express. This slide is very important to understand innovations in tourism. So we have a lot of incubators in Paris, and some of them are dedicated to tourism. The first one is the Welcome City Lab. It's the one from the city of Paris. They have another one. It's a French event booster. This one, it's dedicated to business tourism. And Village by Sea, it's village. It's near Disneyland Paris, and it's from the Crédit Agricole, the French bank. And it's dedicated to slow tourism. So you can check on their website if you want to find, if you want to have an idea of the innovation in tourism, looking from the startups point of view. And a small one, l'Incubateur du Patrimoine. And they make, it's very useful for the startups because you can make an experimentation on their sites. So they have sites all over France and in Paris region, and the startups can experiment their app there. And okay, a lot more, but I have no time. This is a small explanation. A lot of events, you know them. Again, soon there will be the CITEM and there will be a food hotel tech. It's free and it's a lot of innovation, of course, on sustainability. Another one, it's all year around in Paris. We have too much, actually. And then save the date on the 25th of May. There will be an afternoon at Hôtel de Sully near La Place des Vosges from the incubator I told you. And it's a real opportunity for startups to experiment their site and have market opportunities. A lot of, all year round, we have a lot of events. And newsletter and a lot of actors. And a trend book, very useful one, made by the Welcome City Lab. And a very nice media to understand Paris and larger Paris, a lot of addresses, because we are looking to extend the Paris from Paris to the suburbs and to mix local and foreign tourists. So there are the websites, some inspiring places to discover if you don't know them yet in Paris. la recyclerie, les canaux, which is very important for it will be the link for the Olympics game with the sustainability companies and the Olympics. They have a website, they have a place in Paris, very nice one. La Caserne, which is sustainability for fashion, but it's always a place where tourists can go because it's a mix, it's open to everyone, and it's very interesting to understand the mixed fashion sustainability tourism. And it's a place, it's a very trendy one, and it's a creativity place, and the mixed culture, tourism, and sustainability. And the last one, it's the idea that there is a link now, obvious one, between tourism and economic development. So it's Station F, it's the biggest incubator in Europe, made by Xavier Niel, which is a French entrepreneur. There is La Felicita, which is the restaurant. Station F, it's the former train garage. It's a very long building, and at the end you will have La Felicita. And Xavier Niel has a school as well, École 42, which is a free school for developer. And you have an art gallery inside, and it's free, and you can book a tour. So this is it. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to contact us. Go on our website, and we will be happy to answer your questions.
Thanks a lot, Anne-Marie, for this very rich presentation. So maybe if you have any question, 1 or 2 questions maximum. No question. Anyway, you will have all the presentation available on our website, so we will give you the link later on. A very last presentation, very short. It's the tool we have developed with Marion at Institut Paris Région for promoting the sustainable tourism practices. We have developed an interactive tool.
Oui, thank you, Maxime. Alors, the first one. Okay. For training, we develop a guide, and the report we realized for training is based on work done by our colleagues at the University of Pisa at the beginning of the project. We identify 7 case sustainable tourism topics related to activities of accommodations and travel. The 7 case sustainable tourism topics are awareness and behavioral change, corporate social responsibility, energy conservation, sustainable mobility, green procurement, waste management, and water conservation. There are 7 topics selected for accommodation and 2 for travel activities. For each topic, so energy conservation, for example, or sustainable mobility, we defined operational objective to help SMEs implementing good practices in a pedagogical way and logical steps. For each topics, we have, for example, for energy conservation, we have 5 objectives: knowing your energy consumption, think lighting strategy, upgrading household equipment, design building, diversifying your energy, etc. And for each objective, we have practices. Like we can show you just after. Okay, each practice is systematically detailed in 6 points: description of the practice, point 2, steps to follow to implement the practice, 3, stakeholders to involve, 4, the cost aspect, 5, monitoring the implementation, and 6, resources we use to describe and to propose the practice. Pardon. Ce sera mieux de ce côté-là. The guide is available on the TouriSME website. Maybe Maxime, you can show it with the link.
Yes, wait. On the website, you...
No. Can you open the website TouriSME, maybe?
Yes, Maxime, there is a dedicated section called Good Practices on the website.
Find thank you. You find the report here you go to Discover More, Library, go down, and then you download the report here. And the tool.
And the report is organized in 4 parts with the presentation of the organization of the support, the training toolkit, practices to hotel and similar accommodation and travel agency, and information about certifications, and at last a part of guideline is organized for matchmaking event. But the guide is about 300 pages for 74 toolkits. So we proposed you another product to facilitate and optimize the exploitation of the guide. We decided to develop a tools with Genially application. Here you are. There are 2 objectives of the project. The first one was to share and summarize all resources we discovered when we work about the guideline, the training support. And the second one was to propose practices easily accessible on the internet and presented in a playful way. Alors, Maxime, could you?
Tell me
For
what
this
I have
product,
to do. Tell me what I have to do.
There are 2 entries. The first one by topics, right side of the product. Okay. In each topics, yes, for example, you take one of them. Maybe
waste.
Waste. For each topics, for example, waste management, you have a description plus info about the topics, and you have 5 objectives, and for each objective, you have some actions that are proposed. Select one of them, maybe. And each practice has the same description, and the same construction, description, and after down. Okay. Step to follow to implement the practice, stakeholders to involve, cost aspects, and resources we used to propose practice, because there are a lot of documentations about all this practice. So we try to oh. Okay, the second entry, I'm sorry, it's almost finished. The second entry is by activity. We propose to click on hotel, for example. Just Maxime.
Ça y est.
Juste reviens en arrière dans la maison. Propose to enter by buildings, by activities. For example, there are 2 buildings, travel agency and hotel. And for example, when we come in the hotel, we have many rooms, and you can choose one rooms, for example, restaurant. And for each rooms, you have each practice we propose, every practice we propose. For example, calculating carbon footprint, encouraging guests to take away their leftover food, promoting of tap water. J'arrive pas à lire. I can't read. It's too. Okay. Do you want to go another room, maybe? Or, room. Okay. Here, the same presentation with each practices you can implement. For example, waste sorting bins in hotel rooms. Okay. And always these practices with the same construction. So.
And maybe the last one for travel agencies. Some practices are also described there. So you enter in an office and then you have this different objective: installation of in-house filtered water bottle, providing sustainable mobility to employees, promote labels, etc. So the same, and you click on one of the objective and you have the descriptions that was described by Marion.
Okay. In conclusion, the tool is very easy to use and intuitive. And it can be updated very easily and completed frequently. We thought about develop more topics. So don't hesitate to use this tool and share it as much as you want and as you can. Sorry for my English.
No problem. Thank you, Marion. Thank you for your attention. So we have finished. Very hungry, so please take a seat for the buffet and enjoy.